What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. It's Friday, which means, well, we have the weekend coming up, so we can get some games in and play some games. You're going to have to let me know, guys, down in the comments which games you're playing this weekend. I think I'm going to tackle Assassin's Creed a little more. I'm trying to play through, but it's just so big. There's so much stuff to that game, so it feels like a game that I'm probably never going to be able to finish, at least 100% complete it. It'll probably be one where I finish the storyline, that's about it. But a lot of news came out yesterday, including Nintendo kind of getting a head start, or at least jumping out in front of the big reveal, I guess you want to say, later on this month, where we're going to find out how many Switches are actually out there when they have their investors meeting. They sent out a press release that a lot of different news outlets picked up, because it tells us a little bit about how the system's doing in the United States, and it's doing pretty well. There's also a few other things we're going to talk about today, including Madcatz possibly making a resurgence. So let's get started. So the end of December marks 10 months that the Nintendo Switch has now been on sale. Starts in the beginning of March 3rd, goes all the way through, and then I guess you could say even January 3rd technically completes the first 10 months, which makes sense as to why Nintendo decided yesterday to release really essentially a very quick statement about how it was doing in the United States. The Switch is technically the fastest system to sell pretty much at all in history, according to Nintendo, in its first 10 months, reaching 4.8 million units sold through. Again, this appears to be sold through, not necessarily shipped. Now, how is that in perspective? Well, the Wii, according to Nintendo, was the next one behind it at about 4 million. I think it was just over 4 million. It was like 4.03 or something like that million. And then according to everything I could find for sales figures, the PS4 was just behind that at 3.95 million units. Of course, this is just in the United States, nowhere else worldwide. Although I can tell you the PS4 seems to be around 14.4 million worldwide in its first year. So we'll find out at some point how the Switch stacks up. Really, we'll get a good idea when we get the numbers later on this month, because we will get a full worldwide shipped number. That's very important to remember, shipped. But we know at least at this point, the United States is 4.8 million sold. We know in Japan it's roughly 3.3 million. So between those two, it's just over 8 million. And then of course you have pretty much everywhere else in the world. So I'm pretty confident now at my estimation that I put out on video the other day of 13.86 or so that I said. So it's looking good. And we did get from Wall Street Journal, this was of course several reporters were putting out different bits of information about the press release, specifically about attach rates. And the attach rates for the Switch, believe it or not, are pretty big. I know, right? Hard to believe. Mario Odyssey in particular, 60% of the Switch owners in the United States own Mario Odyssey. A 60% attach rate. That's pretty big considering there's 4.8 million Switch owners. That puts it roughly over, just over like 2.8 million units for Mario Odyssey, which is insane because it came out at the end of October. Like, it just came out and it sold just in the United States 2.8 million. Of course, now over in Japan, it's crossed the million mark there as well. So yeah, go figure. Mario Odyssey doing well. Even Zelda has over 50% attach rate, along with Mario Kart, also 50% attach rate. So yeah, looking pretty good for any Nintendo games. Now, we need to see what other non-Nintendo games are selling. I was a little surprised about Splatoon 2's attach rate at 20%. That actually seems kind of low. But I guess at that point, it's going to cross the million mark. If it already hasn't, it might have already crossed it by now based on Nintendo's figures. But man, the Switch is doing pretty good. There are a lot of people before, obviously, who didn't agree with Nintendo's decision. That's like, they probably shouldn't even be making consoles. Well, it looks like, I guess they should be making consoles because, well, they just set a new record for fastest selling system in its first 10 months, well, in the United States. We'll see where it is. We already know in Japan it's doing really well. The Europe seems to be its one weak spot, and that's pretty much why Sony's PS4 is dominating as much as it is, because it pretty much owns all of Europe, essentially. So whenever Nintendo figures out how to get that going, they could have some really, really big results. Now, of course, the one place that Nintendo can really take hold of is China. And we're going to see what happens when that inevitably does release, because it looks like it will happen eventually. We're seeing a lot of language options that are being built into games now that have Chinese built in, specifically added in a lot of times. See the deal with Tencent. So it seems like they eventually will show up in China. When? Well, it's anyone's guess at this point. Whenever they want to, I guess, get everything done, pull the lever, and just have Switches start falling into China, I guess. We'll see about that one. Now, I do want to point out this seems to be an interesting release from Nintendo, because they could have just waited to the end of the month to show all of these results and say, look how great the Switch is selling. But they specifically got it out almost a month in advance of when they're going to show hard numbers to us. And it's interesting that they target specifically the United States, because they could have even bragged about Japan, but they specifically brag about the United States. And I think there's a reason for that. I think they want to do this to really poke at the Western developers and say, hey, look how well the Switch is selling. You guys need to get your stuff on here, because this train is pretty much just rolling along. In fact, at the end of the press statement, the press release they put out, they specifically named several different third-party companies. We're talking Take-Two, Activision, EA. I mean, the list goes on, that they just say all these different places. Ubisoft, hey, they're all going to start showing up more and more on the Switch. I think Activision was the one, along with Take-Two, as the big one, because Take-Two controls Grand Theft Auto, as we all know. Of course, they also control NBA basketball, and I'm sure that will be on the Switch next year, but Grand Theft Auto, that's the big one. That's one we all figure is coming over. GTA 5, I think most of us figure, is essentially a lock at this point for the Switch. I mean, it makes so much sense for that to happen, and that would be one of the strangest, well, not strangest, but biggest reunions I've seen in a while is Rockstar and Nintendo, which has been kind of strained for a while, so we'll see. But things are looking good. Things are looking very good for the Switch. I don't think any of us were doubting this, but to see it grow that fast in the United States, it's going to be fun here soon, especially when the Switch catches up, and I'm going to tell you, it probably is going to happen pretty soon. Sooner than you think, anyway. When it passes the Xbox brand, and then it at least starts fighting with Sony a little more, gets a little closer. We could see some interesting deals, some big first-party announcements, things like that, as Sony starts to sweat a little bit with the Switch. Kind of hot on its tail there. Next up, let's jump over to Madcatz, because believe it or not, they're coming back. I know, I couldn't believe it myself. I thought Madcatz was done. They've had this reputation as being like a cheap accessory creator, right? Like, you see the Madcatz controller and you're like, I guess that'll last me the weekend. If my friends come over or something, I'll get them the cheapo controller. You don't usually buy a Madcatz controller outside of arcade sticks. I will say that. I know people really like their arcade sticks at times. You don't usually go in and buy a Madcatz controller as your go-to controller. Usually you buy a first party or maybe one of those really special controllers that have like all the cool customized options to it and everything. You generally don't get a Madcatz controller. They even did AV cords that didn't work too well. It was a whole thing. They were known for building cheap accessories, cheaply built accessories, and then they really went all in with Rock Band. And Rock Band 4 kind of wiped them off the map. For all the money they put into that, didn't work out. And they tried to do like mobile phone controllers for hundreds of dollars. It was so weird. Anyway, they end up going bankrupt. They sell off several of their assets, including, I assume, the representation to a Chinese holding company who is now bringing them back. So they're going to show up at CES with a different mindset. They're going to more so focus heavily on stuff that made them popular in the first place. Things like their keyboards, their different mouse supports that they had, where they put out different mice and everything, headsets, things that didn't get too off the beaten trail, where they start doing some of the weirdest stuff. But this could be good, and I hope they actually sit down and they focus on quality rather than quantity. In fact, that seemed to be what their press release seemed to say more so than ever at CES. They're going to focus more on fewer products and try to build them well and give you a good price for them, and it won't feel like it'll fall apart in your hands. But they will be at CES showing off several things like keyboards and different headsets and mouse. So I'll be curious to see how this looks, and I hope we get a lot of screenshots and people go there and interview them, because I want to see Madcatz back, because for me it's more of a nostalgic thing. That was something that I think a lot of us grew up with Madcatz. So I hope they come back, and I hope they do well with accessories that aren't junk, really. Next up, let's talk about Paladins. Now, I've told you guys before that PUBG, or PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, it's been very popular, right? Over 30 million sold. And what happens when you have success? People try to copy you. And it looks like a lot of people are trying to copy them. Now, we talked about Fortnite, well known. Even Bluehole, I believe, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds developer publisher, did not like Fortnite doing this. And at least Fortnite had the, I guess, courtesy to not outright call it Battlegrounds. Well, Paladin does not seem to have that courtesy, because they have announced, well, Paladins Battlegrounds. I know, right? How original is that? Originally, they're going to call it Battle Royale, and this came from the Hi-Res Expo 2018. This was yesterday, and they are going to have, according to them, the first ever hero shooter Battle Royale. Apparently, it combines ability-driven combat with survival gameplay in a fantasy setting to create something new. Kinda new, I guess. It's going to be 100 people. It's going to be 20 minutes. And the map's going to shrink. That sounds kind of familiar. Listen, it's the way it is. The genre, the type of game it is not technically copywritten or anything, or patented or whatever. It's going to happen. Fortunately for PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, as polarizing as that can be because it's not the most optimized game, it's at least known. Usually when you think of these type of games, you go, oh yeah, PUBG, I know that game. You don't usually go, oh yeah, Paladins Battlegrounds, I know that game. PUBG will always be known as the game that set the standard to a degree. Again, I know, standard, it barely runs on some things, I know. But the standard and the idea, it's the original. It's the one that people will come back to and point at saying, okay, I know Battlegrounds, and it's definitely PUBG, but still, it's kind of a ripoff, right? Well, the president doesn't think so. In fact, in an interview, he even talked about how, hey, we're just calling it Battlegrounds. You know, I think it's a completely original idea for the most part. They say that it's not related to PUBG at all, and they're going to use heroes instead. In what, according to them, is more of an original idea. Hard to see that, though. Also, before we move on from Hi-Rez, they were interviewed by DualShockers, and DualShockers, of course, asked them, hey, do you have any plans for the Switch? Because that's what everyone asks every developer now. It always comes up, hey, you going to that new Switch system? We doing this? And this is what Hi-Rez had to say. Maybe yes, but I'm not saying which game. So as far as I can tell, Hi-Rez has 3 games they could bring over. It could be Smite, could be Paladins, or it could be Hand of the Gods. Those are really the 3 ones I could see. Paladins makes sense because we did see some config files that seem to change in accordance with the Switch, and honestly, it's a free-to-play game that they want to probably get on as many systems as they can to try to get money from people in microtransactions, so I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest, if that did come over to the Switch. I think it would run okay, and I think the audience would pick it up just because of the way it looks. It does at least have that kind of comical, cartoony look to it that I think really the general audience gravitates towards, and hey, there's no Overwatch there, and, well, Paladins doesn't exactly try to be very original, so, yeah, maybe someone will be like, well, there's no Overwatch on the Switch, I guess I'll play Paladins. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an indie game, one in particular that caught my eye because I think it looks great. It looks really cool. Now, of course, I'll have to play it and try it out and see how it really is, but so far I like what I'm seeing, and this is called The Messenger. Now, Polygon did a very good job. They did a whole write-up on this, and this is kind of like an NES Ninja Gaiden type game if you look at it, like from the outside, but there's a lot of current mechanics added to it. There's no 3 lives and you're done kind of thing. It has, of course, checkpoint systems. And one that kind of stuck out to me was that there is a past and future mechanic where you go between the 2 to solve puzzles. And what was really neat is that the past is done in 8-bit visuals, and then the future is done in 16-bit visuals with different palettes between the 2 for colors and everything. And that's a cool idea. I like that. Apparently, this was supposed to be like a mid-game reveal where you all of a sudden jump to the future and it's 16-bit visuals. But according to them, to be competitive, they have to really give you the big hook ahead of time rather than try to surprise you with it, because some people might have just passed over it without knowing that. And I do think that is a great hook. Now they also are going to have full skill trees. Like in the trailer that they did release the other day, it shows that you go through and you have all these abilities to pick from. You start with a couple, and then you build up, and it just looks like it's going to be an awesome nostalgic time, but a little more current at least. So I'm excited for it. No real platforms announced other than just PC and consoles, so it is coming to some consoles. I'd like to see it come to all of them, because I think this would be something that would work well on something like the Switch's handheld mode, of course, but as long as it comes out in a reasonable time, it looks like they're shooting for 2018, but it will at least be on PC, I assume, with Steam, and then any other consoles they can manage to get it on. I will say, though, the Switch seems to be good to a lot of indie games, so don't be surprised if this one shows up on the Switch, especially since a lot of Nintendo fans remember the older Ninja Gaiden, and this would probably hit that nostalgia bone for a lot of older gamers, and it still might be good for a lot of younger ones as well, since it has more of the present mechanics. So I'm excited, and I hope there's a demo or some kind of build for people to try out, or it just releases sooner than maybe later this year. We'll see, though. It's called The Messenger, though. Go check out the trailer. It looks pretty fun. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for Newswave today. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, guys. Really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave a bunch of comments down below about The Messenger. Let me know what you think about how the game looks. And then, of course, let me know about the Switch sales. Are you surprised that it's doing so well, or were you kind of expecting it after it really just took off after the first day, and then it was pretty much no looking back for the Switch? It's been constantly sold out, but they seem to have at least figured out their stock issues, and I think that's why we're seeing so many of them sell now. The first year. How do you compete with that first year? A Mario and a Zelda game come out that are both considered as Game of the Year candidates. Really, I know people are all on Zelda. You could have gone either way. I mean, Mario was great too. And then, of course, they have Xenoblade for kind of the RPG elements. They introduced new IP with ARMS, and they started getting some third parties with things like Doom and Skyrim. So they did at least build out a very good, I mean, we're not even done the first year. Bayonetta's going to fall in the first year of the 1 and 2 collection. It's crazy, right? So this is really fun, and I'm glad Nintendo is back and doing well, because I think the video game space really missed them with the Wii U, because they weren't that relevant with the Wii U at all. And here they are, they're back, they're hitting it hard, and they're going to have outsold the Wii U in the first year. It's pretty clear. So at this point, let's see what they have for the second year, because to top that first year makes me really excited to see how they can do that in the second year, especially if Pokemon can come out 2018. I mean, Pokemon and Metroid in the same year, that would do it, I think. That would be really close. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a good weekend. Go out, have some fun, play some games. I'll see you on Monday.